Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pooja Dwivedi. Today we are going to talk about what has happened to Kashmiri Pandits. Why are we discussing it? Because it has been in the news or because of the comments that have been made by an Israeli filmmaker on the movie Kashmir Files. So this is the problem, and the community of Kashmiri Pandits are not happy with the comments that have been made. It's derogatory. From the perspective of GS mains paper, second and third, and from the perspective of prelims, it is important for you to understand what has happened with them. So why is it in the news? It is in the news because Nadav Lapid, who is an Israeli filmmaker, has made certain comments about the movie, The Kashmir Files, and these comments have been made in a manner which is not settling well. And many other BJP leaders as well as many other leaders have hit out and are seeking apology from the filmmaker. Moving ahead now, let's talk about who are Kashmiri Pandits. Kashmiri Pandits are Brahmins and they are part of the Saraswat Brahmin community of India. They originally belong to Kashmir Valley, and due to the large-scale conversion of them to Islam in the 13th century, their population dwindled. Also, if we talk about their faith, they are basically Shaivite in faith, and in the 14th century, the Kashmiri Pandits, they got divided into three subcategories. First subcategory is the priest or the guru. Then we have the astrologers or the jyotishi, and the workers or the kankun, who were employed by the government as workers. Alright. If we have to know about the brief history of them, culturally, the Kashmiri Muslims as well as Kashmiri Pandits, they speak a common language. Also, they are culturally very close to each other. And Kota Rani of the Lohra dynasty was the last Hindu ruler of Kashmir. After that, the Shahmir industry took over the area between 1339 to 1561. Later on, Kashmir became a part of the expanding Mughal Empire under the reign of Akbar and his descendants from 1586 to 1751. Pandits were treated very well till the time of Aurangzeb, who had a common hatred for the Hindus, and hence the Kashmiri Pandits. Now, after the reign ended of Mughal dynasty there, it was followed by the Afghan rule between 1752 to 1819, and this was the darkest period of their history. Large-scale mass conversions happened. Not only that, murders, also cleansing was happening. So what happened? Only 11 families survived the Holocaust period during this particular rule. Then three Pandits who were led by Birbal Dhar, they went to Lahore, met Maharaja Ranjit Singh, told their woes, and hence Maharaja Ranjit Singh thought of annexing Kashmir. Then it was followed by the British transferring the rule to Dogras under the Treaty of Lahore. Okay, when annexation of Kashmir occurred by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, after that British also transferred Kashmir when they started ruling there. Maharaja Gulab Singh became the ruler after that. Moving ahead, the Dogra regime lasted till 1947 when Kashmir became integral part of India. Moving ahead, now let's talk about what happened to Kashmiri Pandits. In 1947, Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah became the Chief Minister of Kashmir, and the population of Pandits back then was around 8%. What has happened during Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah's reign, as in every part of the country, Land Reforms Act were being conducted, and allocation of land to the tiller was being done in Kashmir. That made many Kashmiri Pandits to lose their land, and they started moving out of Kashmir in order to search better opportunities. By 1981, their population in the valley had reduced to only about 5%. Moving ahead, when Sheikh Abdullah died in 1982, basically to the leading up of the events from 1989 to 1991, we saw that Kashmir wasn't ferment. When Sheikh Abdullah died, basically the leadership of the National Conference was passed on to his son Farooq Abdullah, and Farooq Abdullah was sooner or later, in that period only, 1983-1984, the centre broke the NC, the National Conference, and installed Ghulam Muhammad Shah as the Chief Minister, and during his time only, the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front stepped up its activities. And the biggest shock came when militant leader Maqbool Bhatt was hung And in 1986, when Rajiv Gandhi government opened up the Babri Masjid for the Hindus to worship, pray and worship in Babri Masjid, then ripples were also felt in Kashmir. So it was all in the making because of these many factors. In Anantnag, which was the constituency of the Congress leader Mufti Muhammad Saeed, attacks on Hindu temples as well as shops and properties of Kashmiri Pandits started occurring. And this was the leading of the events. In 1986, Farooq Abdullah became CM once more and the previous chief minister was removed. The elections of 1987, which were actually rigged, militants then, when Farooq Abdullah won this election, militants took an upper hand in Kashmir. And it all started, we can say a culmination of events we could see. In 1989, the daughter of Mufti Saeed, who was the Congress leader in Anantnag, his daughter got kidnapped. Moving ahead, now if we talk about the other important events. In 1989, Tika Lal Taplu, who was a very tall figure in Kashmir, of course he was the Valley's BJP leader, he was shot dead on September 13, 1989. Neelkant Ganju, who sentenced Maqbool Bhatt to death, who was hung, the militant leader, Neelkant Ganju was shot dead outside the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. He was retired then, and that happened in Srinagar on November 4th. Then journalist lawyer Premnath Bhatt was shot dead in Anantnag on December 27. Militancy took such a huge toll on so many leaders, and this started getting a communal color. A local newspaper published an anonymous message which was allegedly from the Hizbul Mujahideen asking the Kashmiri Pandits to leave the valley. So this all started the exodus. The exodus started because of all these activities. So because of course, if a particular community is being targeted, in order to save themselves, save their lives, they will of course move if they do not have the proper safety and security, which was an absolute failure of administration. So the night of 19th January 1990, from 1990 to 1991, 1992, we saw large amount of Pandits moving out of the valley. So the Farooq Abdullah government had been dismissed, governor's rule was imposed. This was the night we are talking about in the Kashmir files. So what happened? Because of the imposition of governor's rule, the administration collapsed. Total collapse of the government there. There were threatening slogans which were coming out from the loudspeakers from mosques and on the streets. Speeches were made extolling Pakistan and the supremacy of Islam and against Hinduism. Again on 20th January, a second larger wave left in March and April after more Pandits were killed. So this all started giving a color, which was actually communal. Now on January 21st, another very sad event happened. The CRPF gunned down 160 Kashmiri Muslim protesters at the Ghokadal bridge. And these two events, the flight of the Pandits and the Ghokadal event, took place within 48 hours of each other. Both were equally sad. And still, both these sections are not coming in terms in acknowledging the fact that how sad these events were. The two events, of course, shook the world. Kashmiri Pandits, according to Kashmiri Pandit Sangharsh Samiti, the data which they provide, out of total 75,343 Kashmiri Pandit families in January 1990, more than 70,000 fled between 1990 and 1992. And the flight continued until 2000. Moving ahead. Now, what was the reason? It was something that even liberal Kashmiri Muslims were not coming in terms with. They were not happy by the way the liberal Kashmiri Muslims were in favor of Pandits staying in the valley. But what happened? That there were two conflicting views. The Kashmiri view was that the newly, the governor Jagmohan was the one who encouraged the Pandits to leave the valley. But here comes another view, the Kashmiri Pandit view. It was that this is a disingenuous interpretation. But an official back then who was working as a commissioner, Wajahat Habibullah, in March 1990, he said that there were several hundreds of people who gathered in front of his office asking for answers why the Pandits are leaving the valley. Here, he asked the Kashmiri Muslims to make Pandits feel more secure so that they can stay. He has said explicitly that when threats are being pronounced from mosques and speakers and speeches are being given in such a manner that it is threatening to their very existence in the valley, why would they stay? So that is why he asked the Muslims to make them feel secure. And Habibullah wrote, he also appealed to the governor Jagmohan, saying that why don't you give a speech, why don't you address this issue, that this particular period is safe and secure for them. And of course he asked him to mitigate any sort of threat to the Kashmiri Pandits. Jagmohan did not give any sort of speech. Then what happened? Instead of making them feel secure and ensuring proper administration of law and order, refugee camps started getting set up in their own country. So in their own country, in their own district of the valley in which they were living, they were made to feel as refugees. Then Pandits who felt threatened, they could move to these camps. Pandits who felt threatened were moving to these camps only, which were not safe. Moving ahead now, why were they targeted? First of all, there are three major reasons apart from many micro reasons. We are talking about the major reasons here. See, the eviction of Kashmiri Pandits from the valley, first of all, would end the much feared secularization of Kashmiri Muslim society, because see, the Kashmiri society was intermingling since the beginning of times, even after the Mughal dynasty, everything. Afghan rule is a blot in the history of Kashmiri Pandits' existence. But still, even after independence, the Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Pandits were living very peacefully and amicably and very friendly. So the fundamentalists were not in favor of secularization. So what happened? In order to ensure that fundamentalism prevails in the valley of Kashmir, they started targeting Kashmiri Pandits. So it created a frenzy. The eviction of them would destroy India's credibility among Kashmiri Muslims. If you cannot secure a particular community, cannot ensure proper implementation of law and administration, this will of course put a blot on your reputation as a regime who is in support of peace. So that was another point. And Kashmir, if they get devoid of Pandits, would resolve in snapping the psychological connect between the Indian state and Kashmir. That is what Pakistan wanted. See, a country is more than a geography. A country or nationalism is when you have a shared culture, shared history, and a shared sense of prosperity and moving forward. When you do not have a representation of those shared history, shared culture in any area, it is easier to fundamentalize and radicalize that area. That is why it was important to drive off Kashmiri Pandits. Now, has the government taken any sort of stand with respect to rehabilitation? They have. Prime Minister packages came in 2008 and 2015, in which housing, enhancement of cash and everything were given. For housing, assistance at the rate of rupees 7.5 lakh for repairing their fully or partially damaged house, because their houses were damaged once they left, and even if they were living there. So in order to ensure that they go back to the valley, because Kashmiri Pandits still they do want to go back. If security to their existence is promised, why wouldn't anybody want to go back home? So housing assistance was given, rupees 2 lakh for dilapidated and unused houses, rupees 7.5 lakh for purchase construction of a house in group housing societies, and this is provided for those who have sold their properties during the period after 1989 and before the enactment of JK Migrant Immovable Property Preservation, Protection and Restraint of Distress Sale of 1997. Alright, so this is what the housing package was. There is also enhancement in cash assistance, which increased from time to time. That is rupees 500 per family in 1990. It is raised to rupees 13,000 per family at rupees 3,250 per person. For employment as well, there was a creation of total 6,000 posts, which was announced under PM packages, and in which nearly 3,800 Kashmiri migrants have been rehabilitated directly by way of providing government employment in different areas, districts, Srinagar, Budgam, Baramulla, Shopian, Kulgam, Kupwara, Pulwama, Bandipora, Anantnag and Ganderbal as well. Moving ahead, now we talk about the construction of transit accommodation. It is also provided, in which 6,000 transit accommodation units are being constructed for Kashmiri migrant employees. So if one has to, migrant laborers, if they have to go to Kashmir in order to, intermingle with the society by the way of economic prosperity, why not? If a person can move from supposedly Karnataka in search of work to Telangana, why not from Bihar and UP to Kashmir? So it will increase the connect between people to people if we intermingle them in such a manner. But again, they are being targeted, even laborers are being targeted. So that is that. Transit accommodation units have been created. The allocation of finance is rupees 20 crore. More and more transit accommodations will be developed. Moving ahead now, if we talk about the current situation, it's not very healthy. I tell you why. The majority of Kashmiri Pandits, they have left even today. They are fleeing Kashmir because they are not feeling secure because of the militants. Even the around 800 families that stayed back in the 1990s and lived through the armed insurgency are thinking about leaving the valley. For the past 4 years, Kashmir has been without any elected government. It is being ruled by the New Delhi appointed Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha ji. Also, if we talk about the targeted killing of civilian, particularly minority members, it started in October last year when very noted Kashmiri chemist Makhan Lal Bindru was shot in Srinagar. And this was the first killing of a non-migrant Kashmiri Pandit since 2003. So that is still, this kind of militancy is still prevalent there. What do we need to do right now is ensure that economic vacuum is not left. Economic vacuum, when it is there, it is always filled with radicalization. For 250 rupees, for 500 rupees, for 600 rupees, radicalization occurs because of that. They want to ensure, the fundamentalists want to ensure that the Kashmiri population remains below the poverty line so that they are cheap labor, they are a form of cheap labor for the militants. So that should not occur. There are many narratives that are there in Kashmir. So a single narrative has to be formed. What do they want actually? Apart from that, this particular problem is the problem of India and only India. It's not even a bilateral problem. If you have to safeguard your own state or a union territory, it is your problem and not a third party's problem. So all these international narratives have to be maintained. Now let's look at the question. Increasing radicalization is a major threat to internal security of India. In the light of statement, discuss the measures that can be taken with regard to constitutional values. Okay, try to write it in 250 words. That's it. Thank you so much for watching.